Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. So last week left off with Lyra, Mrs. Coulter, the Gyptians, and Roger in his cage, all getting wheeked off to London. And who are the gobblers? What are they all about? And what's going on? And what's dust got to do with anything? Episode 2 kicks off with Lyra and Mrs. C like slightly suspect. She really is. Arriving at the police precinct. Oh no, wait. No, it's MI5, but no, it's not. It's just a really weird big suspect building that she lives on the top floor of. Kind of reminds me of a film I saw once.
Just this room.
Anyway, it's not suspect at all. I'm sure everything's fine. And Lyra's all won over by the opulence and is told to stay out of the study, which won't be important later at all. And generally, everything's lovely. Roger, on the other hand, finds himself meeting up with Billy Costa in a really nasty, mean place. It's all like grime and filth and really, really rubbish. But Lyra, otherwise, is loving this tall building because she loves heights, and Mrs. C doesn't, and they make sure that we know that. But she at least is a bit sad about Roger despite everything nice that's happening to her. So to cheer her up, Mrs. C takes her shopping, and then they go to the Arctic Institute, and Lyra gets to meet people she's only ever read about, and she's real, like, totally fangirling over. And Mrs. C is all like,
I can teach you to wield power over all of them.
And she gets baths and she gets pretty dresses and she likes the attention. But at night, Pan keeps hearing weird noises coming from like strange places around the room and wall and ceiling. And elsewhere, the Gyptians are plotting and planning an attack on a gobbler stronghold, and they go in all super hard and fast, but they find absolutely nothing except for Billy's tank top. And they give it to Ma Costa, his mum, and she's upset. But then the younger son says, I'm going to come with you and help the attack crew. Meanwhile, the magisterium's kind of cross about the gobblers making too much noise and making themselves too obvious and where they're stealing kids and things. So back in Oxford, Mr. Badchurch comes to pay the master a visit, and he's trying to strong-arm him, but it's not working at all because, at the end of the day, the master actually has authority there. So instead he sneaks in, looks at the skull of the dead guy, Grumman, the guy that got brought back from the Arctic. And then he goes off into a garden and ends up going through a magical portal to another world. Our world. And he meets some dude in a coffee shop and sends him to find out who Grumman really was using the power of the internet. And other church dudes end up going to visit Mrs. C back in the other world. And she's been all flirty with the priest, and Lyra sneaks a listen and gets caught. And then once they leave, they have an argument, and Mrs. C sets her demon on Pan, and that ends up hurting Lyra because that's how that works now. And anyway, she shouts out that her uncle's going to protect her, and Mrs. C says,
"He's a failure of a man and a failure of father."
Well, the cat's out the bag there then. So Lyra goes to her room and cries, but she still can't get the lethalmeter to work, or so she thinks. But next time Mrs. C goes out, Lyra ends up sneaking into the study using air ducts, and she finds stuff about a weird machine, and she gets interrupted before she can figure out more. And Mrs. C was out visiting the gobbled kids, and gets them all to write letters home, and Roger's like,
I'll write to my friend, Lyra.
But then she ends up burning the whole lot of the letters outside, because clearly she's mean and nasty. And later she has a house party, and Badchurch shows up, and then a random reporter takes Lyra aside and drops a whole load of clunky exposition, spelling out that the gobblers are actually a government thing and Mrs. C is in charge of all of them. So then Lyra bolts, and the reporter, she gets wheeked outside by Badchurch, and he crushes her demon in his hand, which kills her or knocks her out or something. It doesn't really seem to make much sense. But Lyra makes it out and she gets away, and she's out on the streets of London, and somebody grabs her from behind. Was it a gobbler? Is all lost? What's happening now? I guess we'll find out next week. So what did I think? Well, this show's got an awful lot to lay out in terms of plotting, and this week bears a lot of the brunt of that. And last week had a load of characters set up and exposition. This week it's more kind of plot, exposition, and world building. And it also makes sure that we understand a whole load of key factors about the characters and the universe. I mean, we understand now that Mrs. Coulter's a baddie. I mean, fair enough, she always kind of looked a bit sinister. I mean, that's unfortunately just, something about Ruth Wilson, and she always has that slight look of she's up to something she shouldn't be. And we also learned that she's not kind of really on the magisterium side. She kind of does her own thing, and she's a bit ruthless and cruel when it suits her. But she's also quite human. And frankly, if you haven't really worked out what the connection between her and Lyra is, I mean, are you even paying attention? Have you seen TV ever, or films? I mean, come on. Especially after, the revelation about Lord Asriel. Anyway, Lyra, on the other hand, she's been shown off to be utterly flouting of authority. We know that she's resilient and capable and all those classic kids heroine-type things that we like to see. But we also know that she isn't an idiot. I mean, she sees straight through Mrs. Coulter, which is unexpected, clearly to her, as well as to the audience. But we also got to see that the Magisterium is really aware of portals to other worlds, which makes it really interesting that they call that sort of thing heresy, and it makes it really suspect, particularly if they're paying people in our world to spy for them. But that seemed kind of odd that that's a one-way street, but we don't really know what's going on there. It's interesting that they don't muck about. I mean, that guy straight up like murders a girl in a car outside a major rich folk block of luxury flats. And I love how like he snakes into the car because his demon's like a snake. It's amazing. But I'm curious to know about how that worked, because if that actually does mean he killed her, I mean, that says a lot about like demons, because that would mean anybody whose demon is like a small insect or a mouse or something like that is constantly in danger of somebody accidentally sitting on it and dying. I mean, that seemed a bit weird. That seems like a mistake. And if your one happens to be a giant tiger type thing like Lord Asriel, I mean, surely that makes you an awesome person just by sheer luck. I mean, surely everybody would want their demons to be massive things all the time. I'd also like to mention the opening credits. I mean, you should totally watch these opening credits at least once. I mean, they're going to make a lot more sense as the show goes on. I'm genuinely impressed about how much of the stuff they actually got into it, like in terms of like the world and the story and the universe. I mean, genuinely, I haven't read the book. It's really clever. And I also like how classically TV show the theme tune is. I mean, there's going to be kids out there who's going to remember this fondly when they grow up, and they'll probably associate it with Christmas because they watched it at Christmas. But, and there's always a but. Now, I have to be honest, this is the part of the book and the movie adaptation and now the TV show that for me was the boring part. I mean, it's the bit that bizarrely feels the kind of most dated and strangely the most BBC TV show-ish. I mean, the idea of a kid having to live with someone and them turning out to have bad secrets and the kid sneaking around in the secret locked room. I mean, it's kind of a staple of children's literature that feels very tired. And I kind of hope that this part of the show would be over a lot faster and that Lyra would hurry up and just leave. I mean, here's a comparison. The film adaptation of the story literally does this entire segment in 10 minutes. I mean, from the point where Lyra arrives to when Lyra actually runs away, and including cutaways to other characters and things, is 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes long. And this is it at an hour. Now, it doesn't help to make the point of showing again and again that Mrs. C can lock the lift and stop her from getting out, but in the end, even though the lift was open, she uses a window ledge and runs across like a gantry or fire escape sun into the next building. I mean, she could have done that at any time, but the show never set it up. I mean, it didn't even give us an establishing shot or anything. I mean, it told us that she doesn't mind heights, but then why not show just even a background shot of that happening? I mean, at any point. And another thing is, sometimes a lot of the characters don't really act human, like especially the adult characters. I mean, Mrs. C doesn't really. They go to like the kids' book, I think, of them acting a bit weird and not really seeming to understand how children work. And like Mrs. C just being mean to Lyra and just assuming she'll be fine with that. I mean, it goes back to the book a little bit, and it seems a bit odd considering they make so much of the things where she's like, "My feels about Lyra. Ah, we so alike, yo." I mean, speaking of which, I also wanted a little bit more from the "he's my father" kind of scene, more from like Daphne Keane. And I'm not like, ragging on like a young actress because I mean, she's doing really good work here, but this is like a world rocking, stomach dropping, like days of revelation kind of sort of event in her life. And I don't really feel like they sold it. And I kind of blame like the script as well as the director in this as well. I mean, because I don't really feel it made it as powerful as it could be. And I don't think they took it in the direction that it could have been and it needed to be in. Another aspect is some of the allegorical stuff is really blunt in this. And I know, well, maybe you don't know, but the Philip Pullman books, the His Dark Materials series, is a lot like C.S. Lewis's Narnia books. Now, the Narnia series is fun and laughs and fantasy stuff, and everybody read them as a kid, and you maybe saw the films, you maybe saw the BBC show, but one day you realise, maybe because somebody told you or because you just occurs to you, that actually, really obviously, Aslan is Jesus, and the witch is like kind of Satan or Lilith, or it's like the whole thing's a biblical allegory, especially when you read the whole series, because the first and last books, Magician's Nephew and The Last Battle, are basically Genesis and Revelations, but set in Narnia. Now, Philip Pullman's a staunch atheist, and this is him kind of doing a similar thing, but from an organised religion is bad and the Bible is a little bit silly sort of standpoint. And it only gets more obvious as the books go on. So at the same time, you've got Mrs. C, who's like this great temptress and evil, like snake devil type people, but you've also got good, honest folk, and you've got the non-religious academics who are sensible. I mean, they're not perfect goodies, but they're definitely sort of on the gooder side of things. And it's something I hope they manage to smooth out and don't make too obvious, because it really comes into play in the later second and third books. But yeah. So that's how I'm feeling at the moment with it. I'm anxious for the story to move on to something more interesting, but I'm sure it'll get there, and it's still really well made. And remember, I'm on Twitter at Grumpy Opinions, and I chat there quite a bit, and I also love any comments and like that you leave here because I'll try and respond to them if I can. And any shares that you give me will just help the channel grow. So remember to subscribe and share this on Twitter or Facebook to your pals. Till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my Grumpy Opinions.